Modern soldiers train with cutting-edge technology, advanced tactics, and sophisticated logistics. But what if the most effective battle preparation methods were actually developed centuries ago by medieval knights? Behind the romantic images of shining armor and noble steeds, knights developed battle preparation systems so effective that aspects of their training are still studied by elite military units today. In this exploration, you'll discover 7 forgotten medieval combat preparation techniques that have stood the test of time. Methods so fundamentally sound they continue to influence modern warfare. And at the end, a surprising truth. Knights understood something about battle readiness that our high-tech military training sometimes overlooks. 1. Progressive armor conditioning, the medieval load management. Today's soldiers struggle with the weight of their gear, often training separately from their equipment until deployment. Medieval knights developed something far more effective, a progressive armor system that transformed the body while building combat readiness. Knights' armor conditioning represented a sophisticated physiological training program that gradually transformed the warrior's body and nervous system. Years before wearing full battle armor, the process began with a carefully graduated system that built specific adaptations. Starting with just padded gambesons and minimal mail, young squires focused on movement patterns rather than protection. Strategic weight addition followed the body's natural adaptation patterns, first to the torso, then limbs, then extremities. Each progression continued until movement quality at that weight became natural, not just manageable. Specificity made this approach brilliant. Knights didn't just train with armor, they trained in relationship to armor. Specialized exercises addressed the exact movement limitations each armor component created. Articulated plates required specific counter movements. Balance training compensated for the raised center of gravity that armor created. Remarkably, armor mapping emerged as a practice of mentally dividing their armored body into zones with different movement capabilities. Through this cognitive technique, knights could instantly adjust fighting techniques based on which armor components they were wearing, a medieval version of modern tactical adaptability. Sophisticated versions featured seasonal progressions. Heat adaptation dominated summer training while wearing armor. Maintaining dexterity in cold weather gauntlets became the winter focus. Some systems even incorporated progressive sleep deprivation while armored, preparing knights for the realities of extended campaigns. This approach's extraordinary value lies not just in its physical effectiveness, but in the integration of equipment with identity. Unlike modern soldiers who often train without their gear, knights developed a relationship where armor became an extension of self. Not something added for battle, but an integrated combat system. For today's military personnel who often struggle with gear weight and restriction during critical moments, this medieval approach offers something profound. A methodology that doesn't just help warriors tolerate their equipment, but transforms them in relationship to it. 2. Weapons Familiarity Rotation, the medieval cross-training. Modern soldiers typically specialize in a primary weapon system with limited cross-training. Medieval knights developed a far more comprehensive approach, a weapons rotation system that created adaptable fighters ready for any combat scenario. Beyond simply mastering multiple weapons, knights created a sophisticated skill development system building neural patterns transferable across weapon types. Their approach identified 7 fundamental weapon categories: sword, axe, mace, flail, spear, dagger, and improvised weapons. Deliberate rotation characterized their training, cycling through weapons on a schedule designed to highlight the universal principles underlying all combat. Typical rotations might include sword work on Monday, mace on Tuesday, spear on Wednesday, and so on, with each session reinforcing core principles rather than just weapon-specific techniques. Progression formed the heart of this system. Rather than practicing random techniques with each weapon, knights worked through the same tactical problems across different weapons, creating openings, managing distance, defeating armor, or fighting multiple opponents. This approach revealed the universal combat principles that transcended specific weapons. Translation drills emerged as perhaps the most innovative element, exercises specifically designed to switch between weapons mid-sequence. A movement pattern begun with a sword would continue seamlessly with a mace, then an axe. This built the neural flexibility to adapt instantly when primary weapons were lost or damaged in battle. Advanced training incorporated constraint practice, deliberately limiting certain movements to simulate battlefield injuries. An arm might be bound, vision restricted, or footwork limited, forcing knights to adapt their weapons handling accordingly. Some systems even practiced weapon transitions while mounted, dismounted, or in various states of armor damage. The extraordinary aspect of this approach wasn't just its effectiveness in creating versatile fighters, but its focus on principles rather than techniques. Unlike modern training that often emphasizes weapon-specific skills, the medieval system built an understanding of combat fundamentals that applied regardless of what was in hand. For today's military facing unpredictable combat environments, this medieval methodology offers something valuable. Warriors who don't just know multiple weapons but understand the universal principles that make any object an effective tool in trained hands. 3. Mental visualization. The medieval combat simulator. Before virtual reality training and combat simulators, medieval knights developed mental training techniques so effective they could prepare for battles they'd never experienced, using nothing but disciplined imagination. Far from mere daydreaming about victory, knights' visualization practice represented a rigorous mental discipline, creating neural pathways nearly identical to physical experience. Simple scenarios formed the foundation, visualizing basic sword strikes or defensive movements in vivid detail. As the skill developed, knights progressed to complete battle sequences, terrain challenges, and equipment failures. Sensory detail elevated this practice to an art form. Training incorporated all 5 senses into visualizations, not just seeing the combat, but feeling the weight of weapons, hearing the clash of steel, smelling the battlefield, and even tasting the dust of combat. Historical manuscripts describe exercises where knights would spend hours mentally rehearsing specific combat scenarios with such intensity that they would physically sweat from the imagined exertion. Failure visualization stands as perhaps the most forward-thinking element, deliberately imagining combat going wrong, equipment breaking, or tactics failing. Rather than focusing only on successful outcomes, they mentally rehearsed adapting to disaster. This created psychological resilience and adaptive thinking that proved valuable when real combat inevitably deviated from plans. Sophisticated visualization incorporated actual physical positions. Knights would assume fighting stances while performing their mental practice, creating a mind-body connection that translated more effectively to real combat. Some training systems even use specific breathing patterns during visualization to simulate the respiratory stress of battle. The extraordinary value of this approach extends beyond its effectiveness, without physical wear and tear, to its development of mental flexibility. Unlike modern training that often emphasizes executing predetermined plans, medieval visualization created warriors who had already mentally experienced and adapted to countless variations of combat scenarios. For today's military, using expensive simulation technology, this medieval technique offers something profound. A training methodology that requires no equipment, can be practiced anywhere, and potentially creates the same neural adaptations as physical training, all while developing the mental resilience critical in actual combat. 4. Tactical fasting, the medieval performance enhancer. Modern military units rely on carefully calculated nutrition and stimulants for combat performance. Medieval knights developed something more sustainable, a strategic fasting system that enhanced battlefield awareness and endurance when it mattered most. Strategic performance enhancement, not religious abstinence, characterized the knight's fasting protocol. This sophisticated system manipulated metabolism to enhance combat capabilities. Understanding how different nutritional states affected fighting ability formed the foundation. Knights systematically trained in various states, fully fed, partially fasted, and completely fasted, to understand their performance capabilities in each condition. Periodization gave this approach its power. Rather than simply enduring hunger, knights trained their bodies to perform optimally in specific nutritional states aligned with battle demands. Pre-battle protocols typically included 16 to 20 hours of fasting, followed by a specific small meal roughly 2 hours before anticipated combat, a practice that modern science confirms optimizes mental clarity, stabilizes energy, and enhances certain aspects of physical performance. Metabolic conditioning emerged as a revolutionary concept, deliberately training combat skills during different nutritional states to eliminate performance drops when food wasn't available. Unlike modern soldiers who often experience significant performance decline when meals are missed, knights conditioned themselves to maintain fighting effectiveness regardless of when they had last eaten. Specialized protocols for different combat scenarios characterized the most advanced systems. Mounted combat utilized different nutritional timing than infantry fighting. Siege operations had their own distinct approach. Some manuscripts even describe specialized fasting preparations for night fighting, which enhanced night vision and sensory acuity, benefits now confirmed by modern research. Beyond its effectiveness without modern supplements, this approach's extraordinary value lies in its sustainability. Unlike performance enhancement based on stimulants or special nutrition that can be compromised by supply issues, the Knight's approach created resilience independent of external resources, a self-contained performance system. For today's military, often dependent on carefully timed nutrition and stimulants, this medieval methodology offers something valuable. Warriors whose performance remains consistent even when supply lines fail and optimal nutrition isn't available, precisely when fighting effectiveness matters most. 5. Sleep cycle manipulation, the medieval vigilance training. Modern military units struggle with sleep deprivation and often rely on stimulants to maintain alertness. Medieval knights developed a more sophisticated approach, a sleep training system that maintained combat readiness through extended campaigns. Far beyond simply enduring fatigue, the knight's sleep discipline represented a comprehensive system for optimizing cognitive function under sleep-restricted conditions. Segmented sleep training formed its foundation, conditioning the body to obtain rest in multiple shorter periods rather than a single extended sleep, a pattern more compatible with campaign realities. Progressive adaptation gave the system its effectiveness. Knights systematically conditioned their bodies to maintain performance with altered sleep patterns, rather than just suffering through sleep deprivation. Training gradually reduced sleep periods while incorporating specific recovery techniques between shortened rest intervals. This created warriors who could function effectively with minimal sleep for extended periods. Combat napping stands as perhaps the most remarkable element. The ability to obtain effective rest in short 10 to 20-minute increments while maintaining environmental awareness. Historical accounts describe knights who could sleep lightly while standing in formation or sitting horseback, getting crucial recovery while remaining ready for immediate action, a skill modern military still tries to develop in special operations units. Seasonal adaptations characterize the most sophisticated systems. Summer campaigns employed different sleep protocols than winter operations. Some training regimens even incorporated lunar cycle awareness, adjusting sleep patterns based on available natural light, maximizing rest during darker periods and activity during brighter nights. The extraordinary value of this approach extends beyond its effectiveness, without modern stimulants, to its sustainability. Unlike performance maintained through caffeine or amphetamines, the knight's approach created genuine physiological adaptation that didn't deteriorate over time or create dependency. For today's military, often reliant on pharmacological solutions to combat fatigue, this medieval methodology offers something valuable, a training system that creates warriors naturally adapted to the sleep disruption inevitable in extended operations. maintaining decision-making ability and reaction time when they matter most. 6. Environmental hardening, the medieval terrain mastery. Modern military training often occurs in controlled environments with standardized conditions. Medieval knights developed something far more comprehensive, an environmental conditioning system that prepared warriors for the battlefield's harsh realities. Sophisticated adaptation, not mere discomfort endurance, defined the knights' environmental training. This comprehensive program systematically prepared the body and mind for combat in extreme conditions. Progressive exposure to environmental stressors, heat, cold, rain, mud, and restricted visibility, while performing precise combat movements, formed its foundation. Specificity elevated this approach beyond simple weathering of elements. Knights trained specific combat techniques modified for each environmental challenge. Wet conditions required different sword grips. Muddy terrain necessitated modified footwork. Fighting into sun or darkness demanded adjusted targeting. Each environmental factor became a technical challenge to be mastered, not just endured. Environmental transition training represents one of the most forward-thinking elements, deliberately practicing the adjustment period when moving between different conditions. Knights would train moving from bright sunlight into deep shadow while maintaining fighting effectiveness, or transition from dry ground to mud without breaking combat form. This created warriors who didn't need adjustment time when conditions changed suddenly during battle. Simulated battlefield chaos characterized the most advanced systems. Training incorporated unexpected environmental changes, sudden water dousing, vision obstruction, or footing destabilization, all while maintaining technical precision. Some training regimens even practiced fighting in simulated battlefield smoke using special herbs burned to create visual obstruction similar to what would be experienced in actual combat. Beyond creating adaptable warriors, this approach's extraordinary value lies in the technical precision maintained under adverse conditions. Unlike modern training that often accepts performance degradation in harsh environments, the medieval system demanded the same technical excellence regardless of conditions. For today's military, often training in standardized environments, this medieval methodology offers something valuable. Warriors who don't just endure environmental challenges, but maintain technical precision and tactical thinking when environmental conditions are at their worst, exactly when superior combat performance creates the greatest advantage. The forgotten wisdom. We often view medieval combat training as primitive and limited, but after exploring these 7 battle preparation methods, perhaps we should ask a different question. What have we lost in our pursuit of technology-driven warfare? Knights didn't just train techniques, they developed integrated systems that prepared the whole warrior for the chaotic reality of combat. They didn't separate physical training from mental preparation, equipment familiarity, or environmental adaptation. Every aspect of their preparation acknowledged a fundamental truth: that combat effectiveness depends on the integration of all these elements. They didn't have the advantage of modern exercise science, performance nutrition, or training technology, but they had something perhaps more valuable: generational knowledge refined through centuries of actual combat experience. Their methods weren't theoretical. They were proven through the harshest testing ground imaginable, the medieval battlefield. Today, we've often traded integrated preparation for specialized training. We've exchanged sustainable methods for technology-dependent ones. We've replaced self-contained systems with approaches that require extensive support infrastructure. And in doing so, we may have lost something fundamental about creating warriors ready for the chaos and unpredictability of actual combat. The most powerful insight from medieval battle preparation isn't any specific technique. It's the integrated approach to warrior development. Nothing was trained in isolation. Everything connected to actual combat application. Systems work together rather than as separate components. This wasn't primitive necessity. It was sophisticated design that modern military training is only beginning to rediscover. So the question isn't whether these medieval techniques still work. Many elite military units are quietly reincorporating versions of them. The question is whether we're humble enough to learn from those we've been taught to view as technologically inferior. Because in warfare, where human capability ultimately determines outcomes, despite technological advantages, the most dangerous battlefield weakness might be our modern arrogance. The belief that newer always means better, especially when it comes to preparing warriors for the timeless realities of combat.